Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. I'm Lucas Bennett. I'm around 6'6" tall, with black hair and dark eyes, and I try to keep in shape. People say I was a joyful child who always wanted to embrace everyone I met. This was before Aunt Teresa. I was 4 years old the first time everything changed. I had walked into her room and saw her changing clothes. She shouted at me, called me a little pervert, and smacked me hard in the face. I didn't know what I had done wrong. I used to be an innocent kid, but now I feel like I've become a problem. Aunt Teresa looked at me after that day with distaste and dismissiveness, as if I were less than human in her eyes. Teresa was undeniably attractive and was well aware of it. Her wavy blonde hair framed a striking face, and her physique attracted attention wherever she went. She adored the guys and they loved her back, but Aunt Teresa was a nightmare for me. At 4 years old, I couldn't grasp what was going on. All I knew was that whenever she was there, I appeared to be in danger for reasons I could not understand. Then came the night she injured me. I was 5 and set to start kindergarten. I recall being tucked into bed, expecting a normal night, but it wasn't. She entered my room and pulled off all of her clothing. Then she pulled my pajama bottoms down and injured me. She spoke things that I could not comprehend. I peered into her eyes, not sure what was going on. Then she yanked it out forcefully and used her other hand to chop off the end with a large knife. I was gasping and weeping. I recall Mom saying, "Nasty little boys get what they deserve. Take that, you nasty little pervert." The recollection is disjointed but powerful. I recall clutching myself, blood covering the blankets. I was nervous, but more than anything, I was afraid Mom would be upset over the mess. I eventually fell asleep. When I awoke, everything was white. There were towering silver railings surrounding the bed, like cages. My throat felt dry, and I was really thirsty. A nurse entered and brought me a glass of water. Then a man, possibly a doctor or social worker, arrived. He questioned why I had harmed myself. I informed him about Aunt Teresa. His expression stiffened, and he went without saying more. Then Mom entered. She was outraged, her voice sharp. "How could you tell such horrible lies about my sister?" she was screaming. Her rage hurt more than anything else. I sobbed as I looked at her, understanding that grown-ups are constantly together. They never listened. That was the moment I realized Mom would never love me in the same way again. Later, my uncle entered the room. He said nothing. He simply sat there, staring at me. His quiet made the air seem cool. His visage reminded me of Aunt Teresa's, the same stern look. It made me shudder. I touched the nurse's button and whispered that I worried my uncle was going to harm me. I could see it on his face. She made him go. I couldn't help but wonder why Dad hadn't been to see me. The aching deep in my chest hurt more than anything apparent. Nobody else could see the anguish, and it didn't seem to go away. They removed the bandages after a time. It was nasty. The doctor attempted to make me pledge not to injure myself again. I instructed him to keep Aunt Teresa away from me. He refused to make a pledge. I realized then that I shouldn't trust him. I discovered a drawer full of sharp blades and metal wrapping. I kept some of them with me at all times. If Aunt Teresa came after me again, I would harm her like she had injured me. Mom brought me home after that. Our dog was gone. Mom informed me that he had been ran over and killed. Mom didn't seem remorseful. She looked like Aunt Teresa. It made me feel terrified again. That night, I dressed and exited my room. I listened attentively and headed outdoors. It was a wonderful summer day with pleasant temperatures. My Uncle Steve and Aunt Diana were my father's brother and wife. They lived further down the street. They have 2 kids named Megan and Chloe. Chloe was approximately my age, but Megan was older. I proceeded down the block to locate their home and ended up sleeping on the porch till it was light outdoors. When I awoke, I knocked on the door, and Aunt Diana welcomed me inside. I told Uncle Steve why I was there. He was a judge, and I learnt that judges take care of the bad guys. I remained with him for a while, and Aunt Diana grieved while holding me. It felt good to be held like way, just as Mom used to hold me. But it also made me weep anew, knowing that Mom would never grieve with me again. I despised Aunt Teresa. I didn't care how long it took, I just wanted her to experience my misery. I simply wanted to harm her in the same way she injured me, but worse. One summer, I was sent to Grandma and Grandpa's farm. It was pleasant at first, until Aunt Teresa arrived. I knew she was there because of the sound of her voice. She knew I was present. She was searching for me. Well, I discovered her first. She was inebriated as hell. I grabbed a roll of tape from the medical cabinet and a paring knife from the kitchen drawer. I made certain she was sleeping before tying her wrists and ankles, then her knees and elbows. She awoke, and I whacked her hard with the back of the knife before tying her lips shut. Then I sliced her. I put the knife into her and then drew it out crosswise. Then I chopped her arms so she couldn't hurt me again. Then I sliced off her legs so she couldn't pursue me. She stared me in the eye. You hurt me. You took my mom and dad away. So I'm going to hurt you. I continued staring her in the eyes as I plunged the knife into her abdomen repeatedly. Soon, her eyelids closed. I walked away. I knew the adults would despise me for murdering an adult. There was enough place in hell for both of us. I washed up in the sink before leaving the home. I woke up Grandma and apologized, then went. I walked for a while. I slept among the pine trees. I became quite hungry. The young corn was safe to consume. A guy in a police cruiser eventually discovered me. I told him about Aunt Teresa and showed him the things she had done to me. He held me for a while. He brought me to his home. His wife cared for me for about a month. He informed me that Mom had slain Dad and that Grandma was ailing. I was going to be sent to live with these folks for a time. It's been 6 years. I'm 11 now. I have learnt to fight. I have learnt to kick. If everything else fails, I can break a knife out of a window. 2 men believed orphans were toys. I bled them out. I was repeatedly struck by officers for this, so I bit the cop and refused to let go until the finger fell off. I informed the judge that if he didn't take care of me, I would take care of myself and ignore the police. I fled the juvenile home where I had been placed. I've grown skilled at concealing. I eat from grocery store trash. The establishments get too concerned about individuals eating out of their trash. I've burnt out 3 of them for attempting to have me arrested. Winters are harsh. Winters may be painful. You can remain alive if you keep moving until the cold becomes too severe. Then, if you're cautious, you may break into a church or school and remain till dawn, assuming you don't cause a mess. They don't always lock up after themselves, so you can sleep there again in the summer. I attempt to discover abandoned homes and reside there. I attempt to look after the small ones that have fled away. Nobody else will. I educate them anything I can. I learned to read when I had parents and read all I could find at the juvenile home. I can perform some addition and subtraction. The little children were my family, my own. We relied on one another. We sobbed together. It was becoming colder. I looked for a warm spot for us to stay. I located a church with an open basement window, so we've started slipping in at night. I made sure everyone cleaned up well before heading out to avoid being tossed out of places because they stink. I worked at a bakery and got day-olds for everyone. We acquired milk and beef that were too old to sell at the supermarket. The manager was an angel. I almost passed out when we slipped into the church basement one night. A guy was waiting at their large dining table. He wanted to chat with me. He knew we were coming and departing, even though I attempted to tidy since we had forgotten certain items. The towels were soiled and the soap was being used. He claimed he did not mind. That made me so happy. This was the finest sight we had discovered. He was the minister. He taught us how to cook with soup, which improved the flavor, and he bought us a lot. We received clothing, blankets, jackets, and shoes. He stated he was pleased that I kept the kids together and healthy. He questioned why I didn't want to discuss how I grew up, but he waited until I did. He wrote down everything I said. When I finished, he rose up and went out. I went to bed and sobbed. The others swarmed on and grabbed me. Some nights, I'd rather freeze to death like the homeless in the alleyways than remember. I suppose he informed some people about us. One night, an elderly man with white hair, mostly bald, and dressed in fine black attire approached me to chat. He said there was a facility where we could be cared for until we were 18 and no one would bother us, but we would have to attend school. The elderly man I knew told me that was real and I should trust him. We departed the following day, all 11 of us. I had a knife in my shoe, tucked under my belt, and Tiny Tracy carried one for me. I made certain that they were all sharp and covered in canvas before we went. We spent 2 days in a bus, stopping for meals and sleep whenever it made sense to them. We arrived to a large plot of land in Iowa surrounded by a fence and gate. They forced us to get off the bus and go inside to wash and receive new clothing. I could not keep my knives. When a guy discovered them, he grabbed my arm and pulled me away. I spun away from him, kicked his ankles till he collapsed, and then kicked him again. When I stopped, he gave me a strange look. I responded, I give better than I get. You hurt me, I hurt you. Hurt my littles and I'll bleed you dry and anyone that helped. He nodded and got up. We all showered and changed into clean underwear, socks, pants, flannel shirts, and shoes. They fed us and we went to sleep. I kept waking up, seeking for them, my tiny ones. We were assigned to courses for education. The grown-ups informed me that the children should be among their peers. I stared the guy in the eyes. Can you promise that they'll be safe? I requested an answer. He went on, I have no doubt that they will be quite safe. He was attempting to pat my back. I twisted around to face him. He replied, you lie really good for an adult. Must be all the practice. If they get hurt, I'm coming for you. I'm going to stab you until you bleed out. Then I'll find the ones that hurt the littles and stab them until they bleed out. You understand me, Mr. Liar? He became really nasty and attempted to slap me in the head. I smashed his fingers and kicked his ankles, knocking him to the ground. I hooked his belt around his neck and began twisting until 2 men dragged me away from him. I responded, no deal. I can't trust any of you. Take us back to Aurora. The Fossards didn't smell as awful there. You'd think there was a train disaster with everyone racing about shouting and screaming. I gathered the littles and we discovered a little storage with a mattress and just one door. I could block the door. We didn't eat supper, but we'd slept hungry before. We were safe till then. In the morning, a man came on the door and requested me to tell him what occurred. I recall things that occurred as well as the pages of books I've read. I told him exactly what occurred. Then I requested for a bus and shut the door. One of the chefs approached the room with a small cart containing meals for us. I thanked her and asked if she knew when our bus would arrive. She was not pleased. She just left. When it became dark, she returned with another cart full of food. We thanked her again. I inquired as to where a toilet was located. She grinned and added, at the end of the hall. I inquired if anybody would attempt to harm us if we walked there. She looked furious and screamed, not in this lifetime. I assumed that meant no, so we all went down to the restroom and prepared for bed. The wonderful chef woman left me a large honking knife with tape across the handle. It felt good to sleep in a pile together again. A guy in red robes approached me just after midday. I'm the bishop of the church, he added. In church terms, that's a pretty important person. I can pretty well make people do what I say. Something bad happened here, and I want to know what you want to know. What happened? I repeated everything as if it were from a record player. I could see him growing angry. His neck and cheeks became crimson. He removed a red metal card on a gold thread from his neck and placed it around mine. He proceeded, keep the knife. The card lets you go anywhere. If anyone stops you, put them down. I promise you that if anyone tries to hurt you or your little ones, I won't say a thing if they get buried in the swamp. He shook my hand and departed. I figured we'd be okay. Nothing awful occurred after that. I kept that knife sharp and went to see the kids at least once a week to show them how much I loved and concerned about them. We were like a large family in that location, yet we gradually drifted away. Year after year, I learned a lot in their courses, but I had the greatest fun in the library. It was a large library with several collections of encyclopedias. There were books on medicine, natural cures, handicrafts, forging, and plumbing. There was a whole section on mechanical arts. I could construct an entire home if I had the right tools and timber. A tiny part of classic works focused on survival, evasion, and escape, surviving in the forests, mountains, desert, and towns. I grinned when reading portions of it. I'd learnt the hard way. I read every book in the room before leaving. Everything but the religious things. That was rather repetitive. We were expected to do something sporty every day. Haran. I did not go very far at first. I had problems controlling my respiration. Then I discovered the poetry area. As I ran, I'd recite poetry beneath my breath. Man, that was helpful. Then I discovered a fascinating book about drum chants from ancient Indian tribes transported to Oklahoma. Those were considerably more even and convenient to run to. The lessons were rather straightforward for me. I got into a couple disputes about teacher pets and brown noses. I was destroyed a few times but always got up and completed what they began. I attentively studied the anatomy books from the library and began to target sensitive places. I also remembered the locations of all the major veins and arteries as well as the tendons. I learned to punch a heavy bag. It did, however, leave me with an inner need to escape. I got a package of dock spikes and began tossing them at fence posts. I crushed some of the ends into points to make them stick. In any case, I got along well with them and could fling them about like crazy. I used pliers to get them out of the poles. I usually carried a few with me. I kept 20 freshly sharpened ones in my room. I received class honors and graduated first. One day, I was summoned into the proctor's office and informed that I had been offered an academic scholarship at the state university. I enthusiastically accepted his offer. It meant additional years off the streets. Remember that not everything is all sweets and drink. I recall every chilly night, every hungry day, hiding from police and being pummeled for no reason. I traveled to Denver via bus. I had my clothing in an army surplus duffel bag. I was broke, so I got a part-time work at a restaurant. My scholarship covered courses, lodging and board, books, and fees. I registered for pre-med. I was doing well until a drug dealer attempted to rob the restaurant when I was on duty. I seized his knife and jammed it up his buttocks, assisted by my knee. Then I rammed one of his arms into his groin and held him against the door jamb. The cops refused to let me leave, but the dean and restaurant owner stuck up for me. I had to participate in a combat sport to calm down and gain discipline. I could have murdered them more in 10 different ways with that knife. All he received was a ripped colon and a broken shoulder. The campus martial arts instructor offered something that didn't involve using my hands. That was too personal and aggressive. I picked up the stick. It is called Bojitsu. I ran every morning, went to school every weekday, and worked 5 hours a night at the restaurant. They fed me far better than the cafeteria. Every weekend, I spent Saturday afternoons studying Bojitsu. On Sundays, I read in the library. I was delighted to discover additional Native American chants documented on paper. Others were drum chants, others were dancing chants, and some were intended to promote healing. I'd sing them while I raced around the running track from daybreak until it was time to get ready for my first lesson. I attended summer courses since I didn't have somewhere else to go. They closed the dormitories for the summer, so I remained in a shelter to clean and assist with my room. I ate at the restaurant as part of my compensation. My duffel bag was plundered one day when I was at work. There was nothing to take, but my clothing were left all over the floor and stomped on. The following day, I purchased a surplus metal-covered footlocker and a padlock, then cleaned my clothing. I informed the pastor in charge of the mission that he had a thief. The pastor wasn't sure what to do, so I thought about it myself. For a few dollars, I purchased a 1/4 ounce of silver nitrate from a pharmacy and a tiny wooden box from a thrift store. I placed the box on my bedside, baited it with a few dollars and change, and then used an eyedropper to coat the contents with silver nitrate. The following day, the alteration was vanished and we began hunting for black fingers. We discovered him, a large man who swept the floors and had sticky fingers. He attacked me with a glass ashtray and I shattered his wrists. We discovered several minor items that had gone missing from his room. Everything came out okay, however I ended up scrubbing the floors. I attended a Native American Studies class and wowed my lecturer, an elderly Cherokee man, with a 4-power corn chant. He demonstrated the most common shuffling step used by chant dancers, as well as how each chant propelled its own dance. The second and third years passed quickly. I had a 5.0 average. During my fourth year, my mentor suggested that I write to the governors of the majority of the Midwestern states. I requested a scholarship through residency in return for 4 years of practice wherever they wanted me. I also supplied copies of my transcripts. Oregon accepted my request and I was on. I would finish my studies and residency in Denver, then ride the train to Salem, Oregon, where I would be picked up and driven to my contract reservation. We were expected to dress correctly, so I had to spend money on white shirts, black ties, formal pants, and crepe-soled dress shoes. Aside than that, I had underwear, 2 pairs of running shorts, 4 pairs of army surplus trousers and shirts, underwear, and combat boots. It was the most affordable option for me. Some individuals clad in army uniform, like me, jogged on weekends. They inquired whether I was in ROTC like them. I said that I was simply a running idiot. We ran a lot after that. By the time my residency began, I had more over $112,000 in the bank. I wasn't the first in my class, but I was close. I received a package from Minneapolis including my paperwork certifying that I was a reserve officer as well as directions on how to meet my conveyance to the village. My advisor and field surgery and emergency room trauma care professors banded together and purchased me 2 M17 field kits and 2 cubic meters field kits, also known as U.S. Army Field Medical Kits. I was in hog heaven. I purchased my first otoscope and stethoscope, then considered where I was headed. I bought 10 lab coats, 10 sets of surgical scrubs in my size, lots of disposable surgical blades, 40 pounds of honey, flea and tick powder, 2 gallons of liquid soap, 50 hats, 50 surgical masks, a box of 100 rubber gloves, 50 suture kits, a blood glucose meter with 400 test strips and lancets, a microscope with a mechanical stage and 4 graticules, 6 boxes of slides and holders, a case of Petri dishes, 2 gallons of sealed blood media in AAR, and a small plain paper if I purchased a laptop. And a membership to Physicians Desk Reference, both on CD and online. I was $5,700 poorer, but I carried the makings of a clinic wherever I went. I forwarded a photocopy of the bills to the department that was paying my expenses and requested compensation. I had a pair of balls and decided I may as well use them. I packaged and closed everything, then labeled everything save my duffel and bow staff, medical supplies, danger. I boarded the bus for Chicago, Minneapolis, and Walker. I sat on top of a stack of goods outside the Salem, Oregon bus station, freezing my buttocks off in the spring evening. Across the street was a tourist-style wool vendor. I strolled in and purchased a red and white checkered cruiser and a 4-point red Whitney blanket. I organized my boxes into a good bed and took a sleep. A bad-tempered officer woke me up. I don't put up with idiots that call me boy. Hey, boy, this is a public street. You can't sleep here. I'm running you in for vagrancy. Get in this car. You may have a badge, fat boy, but if you whack me again with that nightstick, you'll regret it. By this point, I had stood up to retrieve my crossbow. He took out his gun. I knocked it out of his grasp with the first strike and had him unconscious on the ground by the fourth. I sat back, waiting for morning. I knew this day was not going to go well. Another police vehicle drove up. 2 cops walked outside. One stood back, while the other requested identification. I handed him my state documents and driver's license. He glanced up from his clipboard, matching my face to my ID. Dr. Davis. I nodded. What happened? Your Reno cop got Barney FD on me, I reported. He didn't ask for ID, he believed I was a vagrant and was going to arrest me, leaving $7,000 worth of medical equipment on the street. He is sleeping off his idiocy. Wait right here. They returned to the vehicle to talk things out. They were a little boisterous, but one cop hit the other. You want to claim that fat idiot as an officer? I don't. He resisted arrest. Bad bust. The district attorney would laugh us out of the door. You want a reprimand for bad judgment. After a bit, the courteous one came back over and sat as we watched the bozo wake up. You hit me. You pulled a pistol on me for no reason. You're an idiot. I'm going to beat the hell out of you. He was trying to get to his feet by then. The policeman next to me yelled, "Get in your car and get back to the station. The captain wants to have words with you. Training officer Adam is with him, waiting now." He gave me a horrible look and marched back to his car, then roared away. I grinned at the pleasant officer and remarked, "Some help you were." The last time I saw a face like that was in a mirror when I tried to brush my teeth with hair grease. We watched the sunrise together, waiting for my transport. A beat-up pickup truck that should never have left a farm drove up to us. An elderly guy with black hair, dark brown eyes, and a face resembling an erosion demonstration said, "You the new doc?" "Yep. All yours." "I'm your taxi." I turned toward the officers. "Thanks for holding my hand, mister. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. We should have just staked you out as bait and waited for the corpses to fall." We shook hands and I placed my belongings into the back of the truck before getting in. After a few moments, I closed the door and turned to my driver, holding out my hand. "Ethan Harris." "Sonny," he said. "You sure you're a doc?" "Yep. Still shiny." "Say, let's hit a coffee house for breakfast. I need to visit a bank before we go. I got in too late to do it last night." "My dime. You paying?" "Sold." We remained there eating and drinking until 8:30 when the banks opened. I paid and gave a tip. We stopped by Wells Fargo. I transferred my billing address to the clinic and withdrew $5,000 cash. 2 hours on the highway, followed by another 2 hours on a gravel road. I didn't see anything but blueberry plants, raspberry canes, and pine trees. The soil was mostly sand, with crushed red granite used to fill up the road. We came to a halt in the center of a shanty town with largely old, decaying housing trailers. There were 4 buildings built of concrete block with peeling white paint: a clinic, a post office, a general shop, and a long, low structure that I later discovered was the council hall. "That's your clinic. The last doc left 2 years ago, so it's going to need work," Sonny predicted. He used his chin to gesture toward the council hall. We turned on the power, water, and phone. "The keys are with the secretary over there." He placed the vehicle back in gear and drove down the road. He came to a halt in front of a dilapidated blue mobile house at the end of the road, a short distance from a rubbish dump. "Dump ain't been used in a few years, so it won't smell or draw critters. We bag it out now, get paid for glass and aluminum." He scanned the trailer up and down. "Place ain't much, but it's yours." He cast a sorrowful look about the hamlet. "Whole bunch of whites and busted up old men. They ain't got anywhere else to go, so the tribe got 'em all together here. Saddest damn sight I ever did see." He glanced at me and said, "You be good to them. They need someone to look after them, not like that Department of Indian Affairs that hung them out to dry." He shook his head. "The place is bone empty. Everyone took anything worth a spit 'cause they needed it. It's been empty 2 years since Doc Cole left. He tried to get everyone together for exercise classes for Christmas, but he was an idiot. Water's good, septic's good, and the gas truck comes Sunday to fill everyone's tanks. So this works out nice. Make sure you hit the clinic too." I nodded, shook his hand, and then piled out. I deposited my belongings at the trailer entrance and waved him off. It was early afternoon. There I was in the middle of nowhere, in what seemed to be a desolate trailer village, standing in front of a mobile house that should have been condemned and burnt before I was born. Crap, I'd have to give the governor, Jesse, the green and purple clap. I stood back and took in the surroundings. The rear door was nailed shut, the hinges missing. 3 windows had been smashed out, and rattling corrugated sheets of galvanized metal ringed the base. A good welded rod staircase and a 4x4-foot terrace went up to the doorway. The handle and lock were gone, and pieces of corrugated zinc were affixed to the wall, most likely to repair gaps. I groaned, turned, and went back down to the shop. It wasn't much, but they could place orders with Walker. I wandered throughout the shop, collecting items as I spotted them. I was going to have to make many trips. I purchased bedding, additional sheets, a bucket, a scrub brush, a broom, a hammer, tacks, nails, potatoes, lard for cans of hash, eggs, a 10-inch cast iron frying pan, a couple of spoons, a plastic glass, the largest bottle of Pine-Sol they had, and 1 gallon of bleach. I purchased all of the steel wool and cleaner they had. I hacked everything at home and began cleaning. The stove was beyond repair, and the refrigerator was missing many major components. The sink would take more than a day to clean. The bathtub seemed to have been used for a fraternity party. What about the toilet? Well, I was planning to pee outdoors for a bit. I began with the bedroom. I removed the damaged glass and stapled a greased piece of bed sheet over the window frame to keep the weather out. The closet shelves and clothes bar were gone. The closet doors were gone. I pulled up the carpet and cleaned the area clean. With my supply cases, I created a 4 by 6 foot cot to sleep on as well as a bedside stand. I couldn't see any outlets. How the heck was I supposed to cope with that? I took a break and returned to the shop. I set out candles, matches, a can opener, a little oil lamp, and a jug of lamp oil. I ordered a single bed, a small dresser, window shades, a kitchen table, 2 chairs, a gas-powered refrigerator, a gas stove, a roll of screening, 20 sheets of corrugated galvanized, a box of screws, a bucket of tar, 2 buckets of white paint, 2 brushes, 3 5 by 8 carpets, a door lock assembly, 2 LP gas lanterns, a mantle, 70 feet of coiled copper pipe, and a few compression fittings, a cutter, and a flaring tool. I reviewed the order and included a spring-style pipe bending tool. The previous material was pitted, so I was going to restart it from the bulk tank. I requested everything to be delivered to my house. I wasn't going to lug a refrigerator or stove a half-mile if I didn't have to. I finished everything off with a gallon of water, drank it, and brought the bottle home. Then I grabbed my bow and went to the old landfill. I smiled. I had discovered a scavenger's heaven. I chose 4 pie pans that did not seem too awful. I had plates. I discovered 2 5B coffee cans. I had pots. I discovered many steel vegetable cans with both ends chopped off. I had patches. I searched around and discovered a photo. I drank some tea. I returned everything, turned off the master valve at the LP bulk tank, and unplugged the stove and refrigerator. I rolled them out of the door and down to the landfill. I just returned 1 oven grate that seemed to be in good condition. I needed to make supper. Looking around some more, I saw a 1B coffee can. I had a hobo stove in 20 minutes after using a can opener, 2 concrete blocks, and the stove grate. It took some time to season the cast iron pan over the fire with fat, but the smoke did assist. I believe I had potatoes and hash for supper after cleaning out the skillet with sand. I peed behind the trailer, lighted a candle, and went inside for the night. For my first night in my new house, I had a spit bath in the kitchen sink before falling asleep. The wool blanket felt quite comfortable. The following morning was Saturday. I got up and began cleaning again. The next room was the kitchen and living room. I discovered 4 mouse tunnels. I'd get to them later. First, I swept the area. The kitchen's tiles were worn. I ripped up the bad carpeting in the hallway and living room. The whole area was thoroughly cleaned with Pine-Sol, bleach, and water. It didn't look any better, but it certainly smelled better. I searched for a water heater and discovered one beneath the kitchen sink. The burners seemed to be functioning well. I drained and flushed the tank, then refilled it. The hot water tap coughed slightly, some debris came out, and the water flowed pure. I smiled, first triumph. The countertop took the remainder of the morning to clean. The sink took the remainder of the day. Whenever I finished a steel wool bundle, I shoved it into a mouse hole. I placed a cloth in the tub outlet and filled it with bleach and water to soak. I boiled a few eggs, baked 2 potatoes, and ate the results for supper. I took a better bath in the sink before going to bed. I laid on my back, thinking, this is getting monotonous, before falling asleep. I awoke to the sound of galvanized metal sheets hammering against the trailer's skirt and roof. We were experiencing some weather. I grabbed my running clothes and boots and dashed out into the morning light. I covered nearly 5 miles. I passed the business as it was opening. I went in. The same lady was behind the counter, maybe 50 years old, with magnificent black hair and 2 braids. "Hey, good morning." "Hey, yourself. How's our new best customer? You broke yet?" "No, but I'm getting there. Can you get me a shower head, waterizer pipe, an elbow, a gallon of white enamel paint, a shower curtain and rod, and 8 drop-in window replacements with sashes for a 1953 MSVL trailer?" She spent about a half hour calculating and researching pricing. "You moving in for real?" I've got to get a quote for the windows, but I know they carry them in town. We had 2 replaced last year." "Great. How long before I can fix my shower?" "Best bet Friday. The rest of your stuff should come in then, too. You're going to be a busy boy." "Great. Now how about some bleach, CLR, a garden hose and a sprinkler?" "What, you gonna start a garden?" "No, I'm gonna give the neighbors a thrill and put up an outside shower." "Oh yeah. What time?" "I'll tell the women and we'll bring popcorn." I recognized that I'd been duped. I paid and scooted. I heard the sound of a diesel vehicle a few hours later. I watched the truck make its rounds, replenishing the tanks. He passed 3 dilapidated trailers. I met him outdoors, near the tank. "Hey, why did you pass up those 3 trailers across the way?" "They can't pay. They still haven't paid for last season." I wrote out a $600 check and slipped it into his shirt pocket. "They just paid for this season. Fill 'em up." He stared at me as if he was about to give me a ration of crap, but all I did was look at him and gently shake my head. He shrugged, completed my tank, then refilled the 3 he had missed. "Hey, don't forget the clinic. I'm opening it Monday." He gave me a long look before nodding. This was getting serious. If they couldn't pay for heat and cooking gas, where was the food money coming from? Bright black eyes looked through yellowed and damaged windows. Sand and scouring powder cleaned the tub. Eventually, the bathroom sink produced a porcelain surface. After plugging the outflow with a bundle of rags and a thread, I used a gallon of bleach and a cart of CLR to clean the toilet. While the toilet was soaking, I cleaned the outside and attacked the walls. I was drenched in sweat after that, but it was well worth it. It truly seemed clean. I saturated the nozzles of the tub, bathroom sink, and kitchen sink with CLR before wrapping the towel over them. I could hear the sizzling in the background as the lime being eaten away. As that worked, I used my F4 survival knife, which I had acquired cheaply in a surplus store, to cut open the cans with no ends. I molded them around the mouse holes and hammered them in place with nails. I retrieved 2 ground squirrel nests from the furnace. As I sat on the steps, watching the sunset, I heard a cough from under the trailer. My eyes widened as I considered the probable origins. I slowly moved aside the metal from near the entrance, revealing 2 yellow eyes staring back from me. At least it was not a snake. It was a large, ancient yellow tabby cat. He seemed to be nothing but skin and bone. I got up and walked back inside to open a can of hash. Half of it went into a pie pan. I carried it out, swiping my finger. I held it out for him until I outpaced him. He took a smell and licked his finger clean. I moved the pan halfway towards him. He climbed out on 3 feet. The 4th was leaving damp footprints. He was going to climb onto my lap no matter what. I softly patted him. I saw my first patient. I placed my fingers beneath his bad paw and looked at it. A curl of metal from a can opener had curled around his paw and been lodged between 2 pads. I brought him in and set him down on a towel on the sink drain board. I set out a pan of water and dipped his bad paw into it. I left him sipping while I retrieved my gear. I packed a tiny field medical kit, pliers, wire cutters, and a pound jar of honey. He quietly stared as I sliced the jagged metal clipping in half and gently moved it off his foot and out of his clevis. I replenished the water and swished his paw around again. He licked that item 6 times before he was satisfied. Then came the bit I was concerned about. I put my finger into the honey and held it up his nose. He smelled it and then washed my finger. He was cheerfully purring away. I applied honey to the wound with my finger before covering it with gauze. I did not use a fastening, I just knotted it lightly. I supported him on my shoulder while cleaning up with one hand. I ate half a can of cold hash for supper and we slept on my pallet. My first client was quite pleased. Monday morning, I awoke to the sound of a rooster crowing in the distance. I felt strangely proud as I gazed around the improvised shelter I'd built. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. I woke up, stretched, and began preparing for the day. The first full day of work at the clinic. I fried 2 eggs for my cat and 2 for myself. I let the cat out, filled a pan with water, and went on my morning run. This time, I went up the road. The pine tree smelled beautiful in the early morning, and the sandy soil indicated that I'd be quickly developing stronger leg muscles. The distance was 5 miles, give or take. When I returned, the cat was waiting for me on the doorstep. I stepped up to him and caressed his ears. He pushed his head into my chest. It was lovely to care for a little child again. That cat was a lean, mean machine. I left him a full tray of water and headed downtown to face the music. Ancient eyes tracked me, missing nothing. This one seems like a keeper. The clinic was in almost as poor state as the trailer. It hadn't been painted for years. The air smelled of mildew and there was a hole in the roof. There were footprints worn into the floor's paint, exposing bare concrete. The drugstore was hopeless. There was nothing left except shattered glass. The surgical instruments were rusted and the autoclave had a damaged seal and was completely useless. Mice had been found among the gauze and sterilized materials. At least it had air conditioning. I switched it on and the circuit breaker blew. Sigh. What a mess. I sat at the rickety desk on what had once been a chair. There was an old Princess phone on the wall with a dial tone. I took up the receiver and called the Denver number. Ed, it's Ethan Harris. I need an instatic camera and film packs. This clinic isn't even a place to come to die. I need to find any hospitals or army units that sometimes give out care packages. I need to rebuild this place from the ground up, or I'll raise a stink. They can't just dump you here. Yeah, they did. Now it's war. I'm sending pictures to the newspapers. Don't burn your bridges. Nope. I'm bringing out the kitten in the basket. I paused for a while. You've got internet, right? Can you find out who disposes of decommissioned goods from Desert Storm and later? Going to a government-supplied clinic might get me pushed up on their list, especially with some photo evidence of what's here. This is truly nasty. I can do that. Don't touch a thing. I'll next air a camera and film to you, along with whatever I find. What's the phone number there? I glanced at the phone and handed him the number. I'll have a fax online by the end of today. Keep your pecker up. You haven't even begun triage yet. Yeah, I know. Starvation is the least I've seen. Keep in touch. Later. The tribal secretary remained at her desk. May I meet with the tribal council? I'd like to give them a review and analysis of what I've seen and what I'm doing. Sure. Council meets here at 8. First Tuesday of the month, that's tomorrow. Thanks. Bye. I went shopping for groceries. I had 2 to feed. I purchased newborn vitamins, hamburger neck bones, cornmeal, hash, potatoes, carrots, peanut butter, grape jelly, and bread. I made a tiny stew in a 6-pound coffee can, and as it burned out, I set aside a hamburger patty for lunch, a thumb-sized blob for the cat, and a marrow-filled neck bone for a kitten toy. Even after being given vitamins, the cat ate the meat. After lunch, the cat sat in the sun, fretting about the bone and purring like a crazy carpet beater. The paw was no longer sobbing. I spent the day creating a map of the community with numbers for each trailer. I wandered throughout the community, creating streets and assigning trailer numbers. I have a better picture of the population. At the post office, some 30 people resided in shacks outside of town. The mailman gave me a decent notion of where everyone resided. He knew of 2 Alzheimer's patients and 4 who received insulin pills in the mail on a regular basis. Not bad for a hamlet of 60 people, with just a handful under 50. I went to the supermarket before going home. Hey, got any cigarettes? Sure. In the cage. What tickles your whatever? Lucky Strikes. You guess. Not a very positive smoker, are you? No, for the elders. She nodded. Old ways. Not bad for a new guy, I smiled. Want to hear the corn chant? Her smile vanished quickly. You know the old chants? Yep. Planting chant, harvest chant, birthing chant, passing over chant, corn chant, greening chant, hunting chant, many fish chant, easing chant, honor to grandmother chant, honor to grandfather chant. She sprang over the counter, placing her palm over my lips. Shush. You sing those as an outsider, and we'll need a new do. When are you going to see the elders? Tomorrow at 8. I'll meet you there. You need an invitation and a sponsor. Wow, so I have a sponsor. She smiled, but it was not the same. The cat and I had stew that night. It needed spicing up, but that could wait too. I searched over my belongings and found no leather. I went begging, carrying a half-full stew can and a cloth. I knocked on the neighbor's door. A lady answered the door. No, not a lady, a grandma. I kept my eyes down and apologized for bothering her, giving the lunch as a potlatch gift. She grinned as she brought me in by the arm. You will look rich offering food. Many have not. Offering to some and not others will make them fight without blows, she said. She formed two fists and knocked them together. Discord of fight without blows. Yes, I go to be sponsored tomorrow. I will call potlatch and make a stew for all. But first, I need sponsoring gifts. I will offer tobacco, cornmeal, and salt, but I have no leather for bags. If you have leather, we can trade or I will buy. I have need. She turned around and slid her dress up, revealing her hip. It was badly abscessed, with red, flaky tissue around it. My hair stood on end. I swept her up and placed her on her bed. Wait, I must get supplies next door. I dashed out, grabbing an M7 pack and an open jar of honey. As I opened her door, I said, "Do you have any warm water on the stove?" I brought it into her room with a cloth and transferred her onto a towel. This could be messy. There could be a worm in there. I need to look. She moaned as I examined the wound with a light. I couldn't discover any parasites. I rubbed her ribs as I finished. No more of that. Now let's pack that hole. I filled it with over 5 ounces of honey and placed a piece of plastic over the incision to keep it airtight. Honey extracts moisture and destroys germs, bacteria, and fungi. The Greeks used honey to wounds, as do people in Central and South America today. Do you hurt? I can sleep. Let us eat together, and I'll give you a few pills. Take 2 every 4 hours, or when it hurts. You must let me change the dressing tomorrow and the next day and the next, until the graininess is gone. The skin is soft and it begins to heal. It should never smell bad again. She grinned as I gave her stew, wiping her chin like a toddler. I gave her 200 milligrams of ibuprofen and went home. I felt like a superhero. I never received the down leather. Tuesday morning was cool, but not too awful. I ran again, but this time with my crew. It seems to be about 6 miles. I went to the supermarket after my run. Hi, I need you to order me 14 cafeteria tables and 70 folding chairs with padded seats. Then find me 10 checker sets, 10 Chinese checker sets, 10 Yahtzee sets, 30 poker decks, 30 euchre decks, and 2 40-gallon kettles. Now for food, I'll need a flat of canned beans, a flat of canned tomatoes, 20 pounds of potatoes, a fistful of hot peppers, a flat of canned corn, 20 pounds of boneless pork ribs, country ribs, 6 pounds of bread, 3 pounds of butter, and enough Kool-Aid for 70. Oh, make those 4 kettles so we can make the Kool-Aid. We need sugar for the Kool-Aid, paper towels, plastic bowls, spoons, knives, and cups for all. Next weekend, put out the word. Potlatch next Saturday at noon at the village hall. Singer needs drummer. Oh, and would you please get me some bouillon cubes and bay leaves? My stew sucks without them. She sat there, staring at me as if I had sprouted horns. Are you for real? I extended out my arm. Here. Pinch test. She smiled and pinched me. Well, at least I'm not asleep, she said. Want to get married? I inquired, suddenly serious. She gave me a long, probing gaze. Let me tell you a really bad story someday. I walked home quickly. I sat and patted the cat till I felt better. Then I walked next door, carrying a jar of honey and other provisions. "I'm glad you had a wound irrigation syringe," I stated when I knocked. "Come in." There on the table in front of me were 3 of the most beautiful small leather purses you could have wished for. I kissed her cheeks. "Payment in full." "Thank you." "Now let's change your dressing," I told you. "I need a pan of warm water again. We are going to make a mess with it and clean out your abscess. Afterward, we'll pack it with fresh honey." She grinned and nodded. Her gaze relaxed, indicating that she trusted me. I would take care of her, like I promised. After I finished altering her outfit, I took a step back and smiled at her. The abscess was beginning to mend, thanks to the honey's healing properties. I smiled at her, and she smiled back, faintly but real. "You'll be feeling better in no time," I reassured her, gathering the materials and storing them away. I left her home and returned to the trailer, feeling overwhelmed by the day ahead of me. The clinic was still disorganized, but it was coming closer to being useful. My hands itched to begin repairing things, but I knew it would take time. I had no clue what would happen in the next months, but I was determined to make it work. For the folks present. For me. By mid-afternoon, I had gotten Ed's package. The camera and film packs he promised were inside, along with a message instructing me to be patient and obtain all required papers. I spent the next several hours painstakingly shooting the clinic's dreadful state, concentrating on the damaged equipment, the mouse infestation, and the disheveled appearance of the building. Following that, I made an effort to get as many images of the community as possible, including the decaying trailers and the poverty that appeared to pervade everything. I spent the evening processing the images and writing a lengthy report on the clinic, the community, and the people's living circumstances. I wasn't sure what to anticipate, but I knew I needed to advocate for change. If I don't, no one else will. The next morning, I compiled the images and narrative and emailed them to everyone I knew, from government authorities to news outlets, including a few well-placed connections in the medical industry. I sent a cover letter highlighting the seriousness of the issue, requesting assistance in restoring the clinic and giving good medical treatment to the people here. It didn't take long before I got an answer. A huge hospital group had taken note and was already planning to provide resources and support for the clinic. I felt cautiously hopeful. This was the first genuine gleam of optimism I had seen since landing here. The days were a haze of work. I continued to care for the children, made additional medical visits, and began working on plans to renovate the facility. I even began gathering goods and resources to attempt to make the clinic operational, even if it meant doing everything myself. The more I worked, the more I understood how much this community required, medically, physically, and emotionally. The folks here were in pain, and they needed someone to care. By the end of the week, I had received another visit from the elderly guy who had funded my entry into the tribe. He had a satisfied expression on his face, as if watching me accept responsibility for the people in the hamlet delighted him. "I'm impressed, Dr. Davis," he said, his voice gravelly yet friendly. "You're doing more than most would have done. You've shown them care, and that's more than they've had in years." I nodded, knowing that the task had only just started. But for the first time in a long time, I felt I was on the right track. There was a feeling of purpose within me now, and I began to believe that I could really make a difference. The journey ahead would be challenging, but it was the one I had chosen. Thank you for watching. What do you think will happen next with Dr. Davis and the village? Please share your opinions in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.